talk about Bahrain today, I have to say that the situation is much worse than it was in 2011 and 2012. The human rights abuses are much worse. There are people still dying. There are thousands of people in prison. One of them is my father, who's serving a life sentence there now. I've been in Denmark for almost a year. A year back, I was in prison with my baby boy, who was 1 at the time. And I haven't spoken out since I came to Denmark just because it's been so overwhelming. If I think about all the crimes that are happening in Bahrain, it feels like a whole people have been taken hostage by the government there. And we are the giant, you know, the name of that documentary is We Are the Giant. And as I said in the documentary, my father used to say that to us, that the people are the giant. We shouldn't be controlled by anyone. If we want to be free, if we want democracy, if we want our dignity, we can fight for it, and we're strong enough. And the people of Bahrain are. They have shown that since 2011. In all these years, they've shown that they are strong, that they are patient, that they are willing to sacrifice, and they have sacrificed so much. So why is it that this giant is still being kept down? It's because it's an unfair fight. When you have Western governments supporting the al-Khalifas, supporting this monarchy in Bahrain, who has ruled for all those years, giving them weapons. You know, when we were in those protests, I was there on the ground. We would see the weapons on the ground, and they would say, "Made in USA." The government of UK would write reports about Bahrain and says the situation is getting better, that the government is trying, that the human rights situation is better. Well, we saw people getting, you know, we talked to people who had just been tortured. Everything was alleged, even though we had proof. We had human rights reports. We had everything to prove everything that was happening to us, but yet it never translated to have any kind of effect on Western powers, who were very supportive at all times, but never as much as now. Right now in Bahrain, we feel that the government of Bahrain has full support of Western governments. I wanted to give a few glimpses of what's happening in Bahrain. Maybe I can't give the full picture just because it's just so overwhelming, as I said, but I thought maybe if I just tell 2 or 3 stories, you can have some kind of picture of what's happening there. So the first person I want to talk about is Samim Shema. Samim Shema is somebody I know. My husband was one of the people who was arrested in 2011. He was tortured. Samim Shema was someone who supported him after he was tortured for 2 weeks and was hospitalized. When he was taken to prison, this other political prisoner told him, "Don't worry, it'll be okay. We're all here together." And my husband can always remember that, because at that time he had been blindfolded for 2 weeks. He had been tortured, and these were the first words that gave him hope. Samim Shema was also tortured, and after he was tortured, he was threatened and told, "We will never leave you alone. We're going to bring you back here, and we're going to torture you some more, and you're never going to get out of it." And they kept their promise. After he was released, they arrested him again, tortured him again, and put him on death row. Before I came out of Bahrain, a few months, Samim Shema called me, and he said, "I need your help." And I said, "What is it about? Is it your case? Don't worry, you're going to be fine. We're working on your case. The whole world is going to know about it. We're going to try to get it out there." I knew what kind of torture he's been under, and I know what kind of things people would say under torture. We have doctors who said they were digging tunnels to Iran under torture. You know, some things are just so surreal that they're funny. You know, that's how bad the torture is. And I told him, "We're working on your case," and he said, "It's too late for me. I'm gonna die. Do something for my brother. He's just been arrested. I'm from a very poor family. We need a lawyer." And I felt so sad that he had given up. You know, he's accepted his fate. And he said, "It's too late." And I told him, "It's not too late. Don't ever say that. You're innocent. You were tortured. You were put on unfair trial. They're not going to do anything. We're gonna stand up for you." The beginning of this year, he was executed, 4 bullets to the chest. And this is one of the things that sometimes makes a lot of people in Bahrain feel so helpless, feel like there's not much we can do to help these people who are innocent, who are victims. I feel sad every day for people like Samim Shema, who had to die for nothing except standing up for what's right, for demanding democracy and human rights. So that was Samim Shema. That's one example. And what the government did in past years, they would try to hide their crimes. When they kill someone under torture, they would threaten the families. "You're not allowed to see them. You're not allowed to take pictures. They try to bury them without anybody seeing them. What they did now, because of the way the world is now, because of people like Trump, because of Western governments giving them the green light to do anything they want, what they did now was actually give the bodies to the families. Let them take videotapes of the 4 bullets in their chest. Let the mothers hug their children with the holes in their bodies and take pictures. And they even handed them the clothes that they were killed in. That is a way to scare people in Bahrain. That is a way to send a message to every Bahraini and say, look what we did to them. We can do this to every single one of you. So this is one glimpse that I can give you into what's going on in Bahrain. Another one would be Ahmed. Ahmed is somebody who was studying to be a nurse. He's a very gentle guy from a little village called Beni Jamra. I'm really close friends with his sister. I was in university with her. And he tried running, escaping from prison. A lot of these guys go to prison and they get sentenced to more than 100 years after being tortured. And in prison, they're never safe. They can be attacked at any time and tortured all over again. So they live in fear. After he was rearrested, he got caught and rearrested, he hasn't been heard of for weeks. And he's probably been in the CID being tortured. As you know, in Bahrain, people have died under torture. So his sister called me and we were talking, and I have flashbacks that I was talking about here in the movie as well from the first time my father called. And I remember that the first time my father called, after 2 months of having been disappeared, after us being afraid that he was killed, I was the person who talked to him, and he told me, victory is near. I knew it wasn't okay, but that's the one sentence he could tell me to make me feel better. He said, victory is near, don't worry. Later, much later, when we saw him in military court, he told me that he got some of the worst torture ever after saying that sentence. The police, his torturers got so angry that he told me victory is near, that they just tortured him so much more for that. And my friend who just called me a few days back, she said, my brother just called. He's in the CID. We know he's being tortured. He doesn't sound well. But he told me victory is near. And that broke my heart. I didn't want to tell her what happened to my father after he had said that to me. A few days back, there was news from the prison that now Ahmed has been taken to prison in a wheelchair with all of his fingernails taken off. We don't have much news. He hasn't called his family yet. That's another glimpse into the Bahrain of today, so many years after that documentary was made. For us Bahrainis on the outside, it's not that easy anymore to work on Bahrain, to talk about Bahrain, to speak about what's happening there. One of my colleagues, Sayyid Ahmed, who's working in London, his wife got arrested in Bahraini airport not too long ago with his 1-year-old son. She was threatened and she was told, we're going to get to your husband, you just choose. Do you want us to go to his family first or to yours? This month they went and arrested his wife's brother. He was tortured until he started giving his mother's name. And then they went and arrested his mother as well. Right now his brother-in-law and his mother are in prison. So even when you're working outside of Bahrain, they know how to get to you. They get to you through your family. And that's what I mean when I say we are like a people who are taken hostage by a criminal government. So I sit talking here today and I worry because my father is in a cell held by the al-Khalifas. My mother is in a home that can be reached at any time. Our door can be broken at any time. There is no feeling of safety back in Bahrain at all. That's where I think that people here can come in. My mother and father, they raised us always telling us that whenever you have something extra, that means you have a way to show how you can support others with it. If you have more money than other people, then you need to find someone who needs that money and help them out. If you have more knowledge than other people, then you need to find a way to share that knowledge with those people. You guys have more safety than any Bahraini has. Working from Denmark as Danes who have no connection to Bahrain, who have no family in Bahrain, you can do so much that any Bahraini who does has to sacrifice a lot, has to sacrifice their family, has to sacrifice just being afraid all the time by doing that. And that's why it means a lot to me and to every Bahraini if people here start working on Bahrain and trying to help out with the situation in Bahrain. And actually something funny happened to me a while back. I was walking on the street here and a girl stopped me on the street and she said, do you want to join a list where we can send you information about cases of human rights abuses around the world? And I said, I don't mind. And she said, well, I can tell you about this girl here. Her name is Zainab al-Khawaja, and she's in prison in Bahrain with her 1-year-old son. And I told her, I'm Zainab al-Khawaja. Actually, I came out of prison because of the work of people like you. And she was almost going to start crying, and she said, can I give you a hug and this? And it is that reason. One of the reasons that I got out of prison, one of the reasons that my baby got out of a prison cell, is people in Denmark and in other countries working on our cases day by day, standing out on the streets, telling people that this is happening in a small island somewhere in the Gulf. So I just want to say that we are thankful for anyone who is doing work for that, and we hope more people would do the same. If anyone is willing to be involved in any way, even if it's just by joining a protest, if you could let the BCHR, who the members are here now, if you could let them know, if you could put your name on a list and your email, and we can get in touch with you. The world is not in a good place right now. We can see a lot of things going wrong, but you can always take the first step to making things right. And the first people who are suffering from what's going wrong in the world, one of those people is the people of Bahrain. So if you could help with that, that would be really great. I think that's what I had for today. Thank you for coming. Okay, and we have two speakers as well that are going to talk now. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. So as you said, these are only a few glimpses of Bahrain in 2017, 6 years post the Arab Spring. So we're going to have more presentations today. Isabel Bramsen is a postdoc at Copenhagen University. Her expertise lies in analyzing the violent conflicts and the violent crackdown of the demonstrations in Middle East and in the Gulf. And her expertise relies on what happened in Bahrain, in Tunisia and Syria. But today, of course, she'll be focusing on, her presentation will focus on uprisings in Bahrain. So I'll give the floor to Isabel.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me, and it's very humbling to come after this video, after the words by Zainab. So I will do my best to give you a bit of an introduction to what I have encountered in my analysis of the Arab Spring in Bahrain. And my main focus is on the microdynamics of violence and non-violence and repression, so not the overall sort of political, regional, global situation, which is of course also very important, but I know that Lars, who will talk after this, Lars Erslev, is an expert in that, so that's great. And my studies, built on research from Bahrain, where I went to Bahrain back in 2015 with my family, pretending to be on family holiday to get in as a researcher, and we were deported after 1.5 weeks. But I managed to take part in one demonstration and talk to activists, opposition politicians, and journalists, and also my work is based on video analysis of hundreds of YouTube videos online of the violence and non-violence taking place in Bahrain. Just a quick catch up, which, as it was also said in the movie, the Bahraini revolution back in 2011 was inspired by the success of the revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt, with a new hope, inspiration and tactics, and an interesting dynamic that I think Mariam also mentioned in the video was that the initial repression of the regime actually was part of what created more demonstration, made more people go to the streets. So there was this dynamics of killing, causing funerals, and then funerals turning into more protest marches. So it was actually quite counterproductive of the regime to try to kill its own people, because that just made more and more people go to the street, more unity. Bahrain has the largest percentage of the population taking part in the revolution compared to the other Arab uprisings. as it was also said in the movie, the regime, the protesters, they were able to occupy the Pearl Roundabout, the central square in the capital Manama, where, equivalent to Tahrir Square. But then the regime had two crackdowns on the Pearl Roundabout. The first one a few days after the revolution started, but then the day after the crackdown in the night by the regime, the people took to the streets, and the sort of the dynamic that I explained before, with killings turning into funerals and that turning into protest marches, that actually caused people to sort of demonstrate even more and try to reoccupy the Pearl Roundabout, and they succeeded in doing so. Obviously also due to the international sort of momentum at the time for Arab revolutions, but also because of their very brave non-violence and handing roses to the police and sort of very brave non-violence. And the whole there was great momentum for the revolution at this point, with many people taking part in the occupation of the Pearl Roundabout. But then the regime changed tactics. So rather than killing protesters, whenever they tried to gather and try to disperse them, they allowed protesters to occupy the Pearl Roundabout. So they said, well, you can stay here. I call it non-interference. And also they tried to displace the conflict lines. They tried to say, this is not a conflict between the regime and its people. This is a conflict. It's a sectarian conflict between Shia and Sunni, and we should sort of sit at the end of the table and have you two parties discuss, because this is a sectarian conflict, and we are the only one who can secure the safety in this country. And this, in part, with the lack of external conflict with the regime, this created what I call a divided escalation, where in the beginning there was a great unity within the movement, and Shia Sunnis and revolutionaries and reformists at the Pearl Roundabout, but increasingly with no and very little repression from the regime, the protesters sort of had more conflict between themselves. So, for example, one activist explained to me, within opposition, you started to have the people who supported the political societies, who said that the dialogue is the way, and on the other hand, you would have revolutionaries saying, no, we need to escalate now. We cannot just take this slow. We need to take sort of advantage of this momentum taking place. And one example is the 11th of March 2011, where on the one hand there was a demonstration to the Royal Palace by the revolutionaries, you could say, but then al-Wafaq, the biggest opposition parties, they organized another demonstration elsewhere. So there was this split, more or less, in the movement. Of course, not completely, but that, at least according to my analysis, is what part of what enabled the regime to crack down finally 1 month after that on the movement, because the momentum had decreased both internationally, with the international society focusing more on Libya at that time, but also internally with decreased unity. So the regime was able to, they destroyed the Pearl Roundabout, and also with the help of Saudi Arabia, who played, it's difficult to say what role exactly they played, because it's some people say that they intervened directly, other people say that they just was there to spread fear. Protesters tell me that part of one way of torturing people in Bahrain is to blindfold them and then drive them back and forth, so that they feel they are taking somewhere they don't know, and then they hear people speaking in Saudi accent, so that they will fear, now we are in Saudi Arabia and we will never return. So there is this great fear of Saudi Arabia. Okay, so the regime destroyed the Pearl Roundabout, and then instead they installed a highway where no one is allowed to enter. So very concretely, they dominate the situation so that it's extremely difficult to gather in any way. Okay, and since then, at least, until this day, perhaps it's changing, and Zainab knows much more about this, but in the aftermath of the Arab Spring and the repression, the police, the regime, they attacked, they injured, they tortured, imprisoned, and stripped people of their citizenship, but they don't kill people. Of course they do sometimes, but they rarely kill protesters compared to, for example, Syria or other places. So it's and compared to their own tactics beforehand. So it's really interesting but sad how they, through their tactics, de-energize the people, and also as Zainab's story before, where people become afraid and don't dare to go to the streets or do anything, basically. Another quote from an activist saying, in 4 years I've aged maybe 40 years instead of only 4. So this really shows this de-energization, because every day you're facing an issue. How are you going to build your life? Because you're not allowed to work, you're not allowed to do anything. If they catch you at a checkpoint, you'll be humiliated. If they say that they'll arrest you, they'll come to your house. So there's this de-energization of the movement that they really struggle against. But at least when I was there back in 2015, there was daily demonstrations twice a day, and the revolution kept on going on. And I asked people, how can you do this, even though you're facing such great repression and so forth? And one activist told me, well, resistance is an end in itself, so it's not that we necessarily think that we will succeed at some point, it's just that we need to resist. So a bit like perhaps Palestinians who says, well, to exist is to resist, so that there's this sense that we just need to resist for the sake of resistance itself. And there's a lot of brave activists, as you've seen in this movie. And then shortly on the situation today, it's, as Zainab also said, it's really worsened. This is a quote by a journalist last month that I talked to, and he said, the character of the resistance is basically at a shifting point. The majority is still with the peaceful movement and non-violence, but between no change on the ground and lack of international support and pressure, the mood is slowly changing toward fearing some sort of violence and escalation. And of course this is very difficult to see, say from the outside, but obviously you can say, well, if you imprison all the non-violent activists, or have them in exile, or in other way sort of disable them of doing any resistance, it's very difficult to do anything, perhaps, but violence. And then ways forward, although this is of course very difficult, but one sort of lesson from the non-violent literature would be to create dilemma actions where you put the police in a lose-lose situations where it's very difficult for the police what they should do. So for example, there will have a demonstration where you say, we love you, King Hamad, we love you so much, and then it will be difficult for the police, if they attack the protesters, then it will be in the news that they attack someone who actually praised the king, whereas if they do not attack the protesters, then they will lose face and look weak. But that's just a non-violent lesson. Another lesson idea would be lobbying Western powers, as Zainab also mentioned. All of you can do something. And then, as many activists and opposition politicians mentioned to me in Bahrain, was waiting for the international situation to become more favorable for change. So you never know what happens in terms of sort of changing global dynamics. But of course, right now the situation is not very bright, but you might have a different situation in some years with Saudi Arabia being less close to Western power or whatever. But that's what I have to say, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabel. Great presentation, and I think very much to the point because of the violence that is systematically used against any dissidents. And we're not talking only about human rights defenders or activists, we're talking about any person that has the slightest criticism. And I mean peaceful criticism to the government. Right now, I would like to give the floor to Lars